right, guys, welcome into the second of, well, it's not actually, there's going to be more than two. It's the Blue White Breakdown podcast, PennLive's Penn State football podcast. I'm Bob Flounders. Typically, this is the second one I do with that rascal Dave Jones, but he is, I believe, en route to Columbus as we speak. And we got my man, Daniel Gallen, stepping in. Daniel does a great job for us, as you guys know, not only covering the Penn State football season, but also Penn State recruiting. He's been a very busy guy this year. Daniel, welcome to the podcast. I also know you do one with Dustin Hawkinsmith that deals a lot with Penn State recruiting. So I know that's going well also. But Daniel, how are you doing? And are you ready for 25 minutes of, you just don't know what I'm going to ask you, so it's probably a little bit terrorizing.
No, it feels good to be back in the big show. I'm back up in the big leagues. Obviously, Dave has some big shoes to fill, but I can do my best. I don't know if my opinions will be as strong, but I'll try to bring the energy.
Yeah. Just two quick things for me. Dave was a little fired up yesterday after James's news conference. So try not to swear. Number one, I know you'll be good with that, and don't call any Penn State fans. I don't want to repeat the words he used, but just try and keep it straight and narrow. I know you'll do a great job with that. Dave was feeling his oats yesterday.
I was listening to you guys while I was making dinner last night. You guys brought the energy.
Yeah, especially Dave. Dave had some thoughts yesterday, so we'll reconnect with him out in Columbus. But Daniel, we're still a couple days away from Penn State's road date with Ohio State, Saturday night, 7:30 kick. The line just keeps growing. I think it's up to 19. It's a formidable team that Penn State's facing this year. Clearly the most talented team they'll face, I think, all season, and one of the most talented teams in the country. I just want to start because it's always just Dave and I sharing our thoughts. And I just wanted to get just kind of your big picture thought, generally speaking, of where you think Penn State football is at going into their final 5 regular season games, giving all the things that have happened, whether it's the injuries or the distractions or the rumors about James Franklin or the lack of a running game or, some key injuries on the defensive side. How considering the way they started and the optimism and where they are right now, what's your take on where Penn State's at right now?
Yeah, I think they're in an interesting spot. Maybe even, I think you look at it from the injury perspective and everything going on, it's a tough spot, especially given with what is coming up next on the schedule. But they are in an interesting spot. You go into the beginning of the year and you say that they're 5-2 going into the Ohio State game. A lot of people would probably take that, especially after last year. But given how it happened with those 2 losses coming back to back, one of those losses coming against Illinois, I think that it colors things a lot differently. And there's a really tough road ahead. I got a couple questions in the subscriber mailbag this week. Are there any wins left on the schedule? Right. I felt like that was a little extreme, but I think that they're in a really interesting spot. We're going to learn a lot, I guess, about James Franklin, about Sean Clifford, about some of these young defensive linemen, about some of these offensive linemen. And it'll be kind of interesting to see how that shakes out. But I just think they're in a really interesting spot when you look at kind of the big picture, and especially given what has happened the past 2 weeks.
Yeah. So let me give you 2 thoughts on Sean Clifford and see what you think. To me, it's still, even though I know we all said it over and over, going into spring practice, leaving spring practice, at the start of August camp, at the start of the season when they're ready to go to Wisconsin. Will Levis left, obviously, at Kentucky, doing some pretty good things at Kentucky. I have no doubt they tried to upgrade the quarterback position via the transfer portal, but they were not able to. But, it was, hey, man, just the one thing that can't happen is Sean Clifford cannot get beat up or can't be, out for a couple of games or just not quite himself. And they were just kind of chugging along through the first 5 games. Everything looked great. They get the win at Wisconsin. They get the momentum. They shut out Indiana. Their defense is playing well. Then the injuries start to hit. It's stunning to me, though, just how different this Penn State team looks without Sean Clifford. And this is the same Sean Clifford that last year was very much up and down. He did not play well when they lost 5 in a row. He did play much better when they won 4 to close out the season, but they didn't really ask him to do that much during that winning streak. They relied on the running game. Jahan Dotson played out of his mind. I don't think they played, teams that were necessarily world beaters, but just the change in this Penn State team with Sean Clifford not at 100%. You saw it when Taquan Roberson came in the game against Iowa, but then they had the bye week, and then Illinois is coming in. They're 24-point underdogs. You kind of feel like, hey, they're going to rest Sean Clifford. They're going to give a lot of efforts to Roberson, maybe even Veilleux. They're going to find a way to win that game and get Sean maybe a little bit closer to 100% for this game. And it just, they decide to start Clifford. He's okay early. He gets worse and worse as the game goes on. And clearly he's impacted. But Daniel, it's just stunning to watch how this team has come unraveled without a healthy Sean Clifford. But it's also stunning that they have not been able to get a quarterback that's, they even remotely trust to put in the game for at least a few series and play football that's good enough to win.
Yeah, the quarterback situation and how kind of all that has shaken out has been pretty fascinating to watch. Obviously, if you told people before the season that Sean Clifford going out and being hurt could potentially spell doom for this team, a lot of people would think they would think it would be a little bit different, that there would be it wouldn't have been this version of Sean Clifford. He was obviously the biggest positive surprise of the season on the offensive side of the ball, and I think that he's really proven his value in his kind of absence of his ability to play at 100%. So, we just got off Zoom with him a couple minutes ago. He said that he expects to be 100% at Ohio State this weekend, which kind of echoes what James Franklin said on Tuesday. What that actually looks like remains to be seen. I scrubbed back through the overtime periods last night, and you watch him adjusting himself. It just doesn't look comfortable, and it's just, you look at the whole quarterback picture, and it's amazing. I mean, the fact that we didn't see Roberson or Veilleux or anything different at that position, given how that game was going, even if you're just going to try to take Clifford out for a series to kind of limit some of the hits, limit the exposure, there was none of that. And obviously there's a reason that guys are backup quarterbacks. You're not going to have no drop off across the board, but the way that this is kind of played out has been pretty unexpected, at least from my perspective coming in.
Yeah, and it's just when the offense isn't rolling, and they were actually rolling in the Iowa game despite those 2 turnovers that he had, it just kind of transforms the whole team. They're playing from ahead. The defense has confidence. The offense is on the field, for 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, giving these guys a chance to rest. And as the Iowa game played out without him, and as the second half of the Illinois game played out with him in there but banged up, they just weren't on the field very long. Illinois knew exactly what they were going to try and do, throw the ball short. They knew he wasn't going to try and run. The offensive line couldn't get it together. And it's just such a transforming effect, all in a bad way. You look at the schedule the rest of the way. I'm with you. James said on Tuesday that Sean felt great on Sunday, like less than 24 hours after the Illinois game, in which he got sacked 4 times. He got cheap shotted on another play that was not called. He actually hurt himself on a play he didn't even get touched on. And to believe that he's actually feeling great, I just don't. It's hard to take comments like that at face value. And seriously, I know they can't say, boy, my midsection's killing me. I hope I don't get hit by Ohio State's defensive line. So I guess I guess I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But I think everyone's kind of picked up on the fact that he won't be 100% against Ohio State. And you just wonder kind of what Penn State is really walking into. We don't get to see a lot of Ohio State. We just get to see the box scores and the highlights as they continue to steamroll teams that are not very good. But Daniel, what we do know is that they have been stacking elite recruiting classes on top of each other for several years. Their quarterback room is, it's unbelievable. The best quarterback on the team might be the kid that reclassified from Texas. We don't know that, but the kid that's playing, CJ Stroud, is a Heisman contender, and he's probably going to be going to New York City. He could actually win the award. They have another 5-star from Pennsylvania. I think he played one game when Stroud might have been banged up. He did a great job. It's just, even though they're beating up on teams that aren't great, you can see the athleticism, you can see the skill position talent. And now that their defense made a change at defensive coordinator, Daniel, it looks like they're starting to figure out things at that end of the spectrum. So, we're going to pick this game a little bit later, but as you look, we always talk about maybe matchups and questions. What are a couple of matchups, Daniel, for you that Penn State is either going to have to be really concerned about, or they're going to have to find a way to exploit against Ohio State, and it won't be easy?
Yeah, I think when you look at the Penn State offensive perspective, I think that there should be opportunities for Jahan Dotson, Parker Washington, Keandre Lambert-Smith to take advantage of Ohio State in the passing game here and there. I think that Jahan Dotson is the type of player. Yeah, I mean, we all saw what he did to Shaun Wade last year
Right.
in that game, and Jahan Dotson is still one of those transformative talents who, it doesn't matter who he's matched up against, the defense will be paying attention to him, and he can make the plays. Of course, how his ability to make those plays is impacted by Clifford.
Yes.
So that's something where you kind of have to, you kind of think about that a little bit. Obviously, the Penn State offensive line has had a shaky performance this season,
Yeah.
and you look at what's across the way. But I think you look at the Ohio State offense against the Penn State defense, and that's kind of where some of the very interesting matchups are. I think you look at the wide receivers, Garrett
Mhm.
Wilson, Chris Olave, Jackson Smith-Njigba against Joey Porter Jr., Tariq Castro-Fields, Daquan Hardy, Jaquan Brisker, Jair Brown. I mean, that's going to be a lot of fun. And it is the thing where I was looking at the rosters and the depth charts last night, and I kind of hope that we get to the point where we get to see those guys go one-on-one.
Yeah.
But we might not even get to that point when you look at what TreVeyon Henderson has done,
Sure.
and especially coming off how Illinois ran the ball against this Penn State defense.
I call it the Chase Brown game now. I just call it the Chase Brown game because
Yeah.
he was unbelievable.
I was looking through TreVeyon Henderson's game logs, and he only has 3 games this year where he's had more than 10 carries. He only has 2 100-yard games, but he hasn't had to do that much. I mean, 8.8 yards per carry, 11 touchdowns. He's been a load. And no PJ Mustipher in the middle. We saw that impact. I think that's going to be the big matchup, because if Penn State can't stop that, then having those cornerbacks being able to match up well with those wide receivers doesn't even matter.
Right. And, last year when these two teams played in week 2 of a shortened season, a pandemic season, obviously you can make the argument that for whatever reason, I think Penn State might not have been playing its best football they just didn't look like that. I think the emphasis was on safety and testing and all that, but Castro Fields and Joey Porter were out there against Olave and Wilson, and it did not go well in that game. Those guys absolutely torched Penn State. It did help that Justin Fields might have had, as good as he was in that Clemson semifinal, the performance at Penn State might have been his second best game last year. And Stroud sure looks like he is an elite talent throwing the ball as well, and he can move. So I'm with you. That is a very enticing matchup. I think Penn State fans and maybe the Penn State defensive backs are very excited about seeing what might happen, to which I would say, Daniel, be careful what you wish for, because those guys are really, really good. And if you have to worry at all about committing an extra defensive back to the box to deal with Henderson, man, it's going to be, you just can't make any mistakes against this group. And that's, to me, what I think is so worrisome if you're Penn State. The defense, they've played very hard. They've played very good in the red zone. Even in the Illinois game, I would argue that they have, but their depth concerns are beginning to show up. And I just don't know, at some point, these guys are going to start to get tired because they're really only playing 3 defensive ends. They're really only playing 3 defensive tackles. And like you said, no Mustafa. And you just wonder when the dam's going to break. I mean, it's just you can't. And they've played so many snaps. I just don't know. Can I conjure up a path for Penn State to stay in the game for 4 quarters? I think I probably could, but a lot would have to go wrong for Ohio State. But I would say if these two teams, the way they're constituted right now, played 15 times Saturday night, they played that game 15 times. I think Ohio State would probably win at least 14 of them.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I think the fan base knows kind of what's coming. And they've only ever won twice at the Horseshoe since they joined the Big Ten. It's been a while. Is there something you're looking forward to? You'll be out there with me and Dave and Joe Herman, obviously. Is there something you're looking forward to seeing, I guess, from Penn State? I mean, before the Illinois game, Brett Bielema essentially called out his entire veteran leadership group, saying, look, I wasn't left with very many players. We're not getting a lot from the guys that I inherited. The offensive line really hasn't gotten the job done. Now it looks like a brilliant stroke because they sure came to play against Penn State with that weird jumbo formation. James is not really the kind of guy that's going to call anyone out. He's going to kind of hint at some things. But do you think there is a group on the Penn State team that's at least motivated to play and play better?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the offense, I think both lines probably have motivation based on how they played against Illinois. The offensive line, we might see Juice Scruggs at center, Mike Miranda at guard, kind of what we saw late in that game. I feel like that group has a lot to prove. Then on the other side, the linebackers and that defensive front, they have a lot to prove too, based on how they played in the Chase Brown game. So I think those are kind of the 2 groups where, it's probably cliche, but they probably don't need to be called out. I think that everyone kind of knows where those struggles were. And I think that when you look at those groups' ability to kind of make plays on their own, maybe you see something from the linebackers. Curtis Jacobs and Brandon Smith are 2 of the top individual talents on either side of the ball that Penn State has. So they could be in a position to make some things happen. But yeah, I mean, Brett Bielema, he pushed the right buttons last week and it showed on Saturday.
I hate giving that guy credit, but he did.
And you mentioned it, where James Franklin doesn't really do things that way. So I don't know what buttons he's trying to push behind the scenes, or who is the coach, whether maybe it's Mike Yurcich. We've seen him at practice be pretty fiery with his guys. Maybe he's the one kind of doing that motivating. But I think that when you look at the 2 groups with the most to prove, it's the front 7 on defense, then that front 5, or if they have to use a 6th because the tight ends aren't playing well, that front on the offensive side.
Yeah, Jaquan Brisker, I think, is another guy that can change things for the good with one play. But he's another guy that, I mean, talk about guys that are, we're talking about Sean Clifford being not 100%, and obviously PJ Mustafa's out. I don't think Jaquan Brisker has been 100% from maybe. I think early in that Wisconsin game, something happened to his shoulder, or maybe he even brought it into the game. But you can just tell he is really struggling to play at a very high level for 4 quarters. And it's not his talent. It's just, I think, his pain threshold. It's very unfortunate. You wonder when that's going to clear up. It's probably not going to be during the regular season. But he's another guy, I think. But even when we talk about these guys making a play, or making getting a turnover, or foiling a drive, getting a stop on 4th and 1, they still have to defend like another 12 possessions. And Ohio State, man, they can go 60 or 70 yards on you, just when you think you're feeling pretty good, just because of the skill level, on the outside, and the way that Stroud can throw the ball. The receivers can turn a short gain into a long catch and run touchdown. If you're not in the right gap against TreVeyon Henderson, it's over. So yeah, I know this sounds like a doomsday podcast, but I think we're just trying to be realistic. Can you see, Daniel, a scenario before you make your pick that Penn State keeps it close? And what do you think would happen if, it's at 24 or 30-point game. I know that Penn State, even when they haven't been good, they really good. They've played Ohio State very tough. But there was a game out there in 2015, James' second year, where they lost 38-10. They had Hackenberg, they had Godwin, they had Saquon Barkley. They did not have a great offensive line. But I mean, it is possible for the game to get away from him. What are your thoughts just on how you see the game playing out in terms of high scoring, low scoring? What do you got?
Yeah, I think that there will be, I think for the scenario where this game gets away from Penn State, like it kind of falls on the defense, where the defense has played this bend don't break style the whole year, and they're going up. I mean, this is really the first time they're going up an offense that is designed to break you. So
Right.
it's going to be a really tough test to kind of avoid those big plays. But I think that we'll see more points than we've seen in some other Penn State games
Yeah.
this year, just based on Ohio State's talent level and the way that Ohio State's been playing. I do think if it's a low scoring game, that favors Penn State a lot more, especially given how the offense is played. But if it's a low scoring game, you're going to need to grind out the clock. You're going to need that running game to show up, which hasn't showed up yet this year. So
Yeah.
it's really hard to find that path to victory. At least from my perspective, I don't know about you.
Yeah. So this is the Blue White Breakdown podcast. You're listening to Daniel Gallen and myself, Bob Flounders, talk about and preview the Ohio State Penn State game Saturday night. You guys, I think you guys know most of the details. They're heavy underdogs. They're a little beat up. Sean Clifford is allegedly expecting to be 100%. We're gonna say maybe that might be a white lie, but we understand why they're saying what they're saying. It is a night game. Ohio State's rolling right now. Ohio State hasn't beaten anyone, but I don't know that Penn State really. That Wisconsin win is starting to look better, but that Wisconsin team, when Graham Mertz was chucking it around the field, that was a different Wisconsin team than Penn State saw. So I don't know that I'm buying that Ohio State hasn't beaten anyone of note. I think Ohio State's a pretty talented team. But yeah, we'll be at the game. Daniel, before you make your final score prediction, who is the player you're going to be watching the most on the Penn State side? And give me do you have a bold prediction in your bones for this game, or do you think that maybe this could be one of those games where it could play out exactly as a lot of people think it's going to play out?
Yeah, in terms of players to watch, I would say Derek Tangelo, Keziah Izzard, Devon Ellies. I think that just based on what we've seen from TreVeyon Henderson and the Ohio, and I think Master Teague is supposed to be back too. You look at the Ohio State offensive line. I think that you just kind of got to start in the interior. And then on the Penn State side, I think Jahan Dotson could have a big game. We talked about it earlier, where it's unfortunate for him that so much of his production is contingent on Sean Clifford. And if Clifford's not 100%, then that affects Jahan Dotson. But we haven't seen much from the tight ends. We haven't seen much from the running backs. And so I think that if Penn State is going to have a chance, you're going to need another kind of superhuman effort from Jahan Dotson. He said yesterday that he was asked kind of about last year's game being sort of his breakout on the national scene. And he said that, he's trying to do that again this year, if not better, whether or not the quarterback can help him make that happen. I think that he's someone that you just kind of have to keep an eye on.
Yeah. Here's one thing I've been thinking about this week, and it's not really a Penn State thing, but if you're Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, are you tired of hearing about how great Jahan Dotson is after what you did as well in last year's game? And you also, physically, you're right there with the kid. Jahan Dotson is a great player. He is handcuffed at the moment by what's going on with Sean Clifford. I'm not saying Jahan Dotson is not a great player, Penn State fans. What I'm saying is, when you're Ohio State and you have those two guys in the same conversation with Jahan Dotson, and all they've been hearing all year is about Jahan Dotson, do you think they might want to put on a show on Saturday night?
It would not surprise me at all. I think that those guys, all those guys pay attention. They know what's going on. Those guys have gotten theirs, and I think they know they have a chance to do it with a lot of people watching on Saturday.
Yeah, the guy that I'm going to watch, just because I think he's got a big game in him, and he's been good all year. But I think like a game on a national stage against an offense like this, you want to talk about boosting draft stock they're already talking about him as a potential first round pick or early second round pick. I think Brandon Smith, if he has a big game, I mean, I just think, the offensive line of Ohio State is going to just cause some issues. I think even for Ebiketie, and Jesse Luketa, those have really been the impact edge defenders for Penn State this year. But man, Ohio State's got some great tackles and some great guards. So it's going to be, I think for the guys that are playing down, it's going to be a little challenging. But I want to see Brandon Smith maybe make a couple of plays, maybe big hits, maybe force a turnover. But I think he's a guy that if he has a big game, even if Penn State gets smacked around a little bit, I think he's really going to be a guy that people are going to be watching the rest of the year. So he's kind of the guy. I don't have a bold prediction either, because I don't have the stones, Daniel, to just make this like a one possession scoring game. I think where Penn State's at right now, even if Clifford's better, I just don't know that they can score enough to kind of keep pace with Ohio State. Penn State fans will remember 2 years ago, that was a good Penn State team that went into Columbus, and the final score was 28-17. And that might normally give them hope. But number one, Micah Parsons isn't going to bail you out on defense. And Penn State forced like 5 turnovers in that game, three in scoring. I mean, they were down 21-0 when Clifford led the game. I thought they were going to lose 42-3. But they cobbled it together. It was a 21-17 game going into the fourth quarter. Ohio State won. I don't think that's going to happen on Saturday night. I'll let you go first, since you have been nice enough to join me on this podcast. And I feel like I'm starting to ramble. So give me a score and a storyline coming out of that game based upon what you see on the field.
Yeah, I went Ohio State 31, Penn State 14. I do think that Ohio State they've really feasted on some of the competition they've played, which they're supposed to do. They're superior than 99% of the teams in the country. So I think that Penn State has a little bit of a closer talent gap. I think that it'll probably be decently close early on. And then I think that you'll just kind of see the depth and the athletes that Ohio State has take over. I think it'll be kind of one of those, it was closer than the final score, even though you only remember the final score. So, but I think the big storyline coming out will be kind of, I think it'll just be about the quarterback. I mean, I think that's kind of the way that they've handled the room, the way that they've developed or not developed the guys behind Sean Clifford. I think that's probably what we'll all be talking about Sunday, Monday, and into Tuesday when we talk to James again after the game.
Yeah, I think your analysis is obviously, I think it's spot on. I think I picked 34-13, so I think we see it kind of the same way. I think I even said when I made my pick was I could see this game at halftime being very competitive, just because I think Penn State's pride is wounded a little bit. I think they will fight. I think they will scheme the game to try and slow it down a little bit if they can. I mean, originally they wanted to go and play fast, but they were not playing fast against Illinois. I think they need to hang in there and take some shots early in the first half from Ohio State, make some plays maybe in the red zone and get some confidence, because I just don't know what to think about Sean. I think we're going to know, Daniel, after about 2 possessions from the Penn State offense, how Sean Clifford's really feeling. And I'm anxious to see, what that looks like. He did not run against Illinois, and Illinois figured out pretty quickly they didn't have to really respect him running the ball. I think it might be a mistake for him to run the ball against Ohio State, but you know what? I'm not a doctor. So I just wonder what's going to happen if he takes a half a dozen big shots in this game. So I'm going to say 34-13. And I think you're right. We are going to be talking about the quarterbacks, but more specifically, I think we're going to be talking about, with them having 4 games on the regular season schedule left, is this going to be better than a 6-6 team if Clifford doesn't look good? Because I mean, yes, Rutgers is, if Illinois can do it, Rutgers can do it. They got to go to Maryland. They got to go to Michigan State. Michigan's coming in. So, I mean, is it a potentially 6-6, a season if things go horribly wrong? I think in the Horseshoe. Daniel, before I let you go, just wanted to ask you, how are you enjoying? You're up in State College. I don't know if the PennLive and the Penn State fans know this. We got Dave Jones in Downingtown. I'm in Harrisburg. You're in State College. So we got most of North Central, and South Central Pennsylvania covered from a living perspective. I know Dave's in the woods somewhere in Downingtown, unmarked location, so none of the fans can get at him. Are you enjoying? I think this is your first year, I believe, up in State College. Is everything going well for you?
It's been great. Living up here is great. We just had the leaves turn, I think,
Yep.
Monday. Walked outside, noticed it was truly fall. So it's beautiful out there right now. I might go stand on my deck for a little while before heading over to see practice tonight and get some fresh air. But it's been great. Penn State has made things interesting, and can't ask for more than that.
Yeah, and Daniel, I think I'm not speaking out of turn. As long as you can get your growlers filled with the right liquid that makes you happy, I think that's half the battle. And it sounds like things are going well on that front as well. They're going great for me on all fronts in Harrisburg, but unfortunately, Penn State fans have already known too much about me. Anyway, Daniel, I know you got to get to practice. Thanks for filling in on this edition of the Blue White Breakdown podcast. I know you and I are going to be talking quite a bit as the season goes on, and I have a very not a funny feeling, I'm pretty sure we'll probably be doing at least one podcast per week once they get out of season, if Penn State season ever ends. But you've been great. Thanks for the info and perspective. I know you got to get to practice. I hope you guys enjoyed this edition. Daniel, you could take it out for us if you want.
Thanks for having me up in the majors this week. Be sure to get the Blue White Breakdown anywhere you get your podcasts. You can follow me on Twitter at DanielJTGallen, PennLive.com/Penn State Football, and we'll talk to you guys soon.